Hey and welcome to A Good Chat Videos. My name's Lucy. Thank you for joining me again this week. This week I thought we'd have a chat about why you might seek counselling. Counselling is a really big investment and it's something that financially and emotionally you may not feel ready for. But on the other hand, it may be that it's the perfect time for you to commit to something that changes your life. Not only can counselling help with a myriad of issues that we'll go into in a minute, it can really reset things in your life and give you a fresh start and a fresh perspective on not just yourself, but other people's interactions around you. Now, like I said, it is a really big commitment of both time, effort, mentality, and money. But in the end, is it going to be worth it for you? Well, the answer to that is it's as worth it as you put into it. So if you put into it expecting to come out with somebody else fixing your problems, no, counselling is not for you. Counselling is a process of being guided through your inner self. It's about exploring all of the options that are available in you, all the tools and resources that you have to deal with situations, and setting up new tools and resources that you can access to deal with issues in your life. It's absolutely not a quick fix solution that's handed to you. The work is done by you. A counsellor is there to guide you through this process. It's somebody that you build a deep and meaningful relationship with, that you might end up telling them things that you've never told anybody else in your life in a non-judgmental, safe environment. A good counsellor is going to be completely non-judgmental. The actions that you've made in your life impact you, not the counsellor. The counsellor is there to help you step outside of yourself and to assess these things and maybe apply a new way of thinking to them. Now, there are many reasons why you might actually seek counselling, or that you may be kicking around in your head going, is this what I need? Oftentimes, counselling is something that's prescribed to you by a doctor or a health practitioner. You may be told that go and speak to this person, they're really good with this particular type of therapy. It may be that you go to a doctor sort of thinking that they're going to prescribe something to you, and what they end up saying is go to therapy, because therapy is known for being really effective in some cases, much more so than medications. Medications tend to be a bit of a band-aid solution, and when it comes to mental health, that's not always effective. Of course, prescriptive therapeutic intervention, absolutely valid in a lot of cases. But for some people, when they're just trying to deal with something going on in the background or the way that they interact with people, there aren't a lot of medications that are going to help this particularly effectively. So let's explore some of the reasons why you might find yourself thinking, should I see a counsellor? Number one is that you don't actually need to go to a doctor or a psychiatrist to decide that you need therapy. You could just decide that the feelings that you've been living with for a long time, such as inadequacy, fear, anxiety, some types of depression, that these are things that you could manage if you just knew how. Coming along to a therapy session can really set in motion a process of thinking that can lead you on a path of self-discovery and a way to get through these feelings and emotions. In our professional lives, there can be something called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is something that makes us feel like we're not the right person for the job and somehow we've failed upwards or sideways. It's really hard to explain. But it's where you are professionally trained in your job. You may have been doing it your whole life. You've got all the degrees, you've got a master's, a diploma, whatever it takes. You've got the experience, the knowledge, and other people would never guess that you're feeling like you're a fraud in that position. It's incredibly common. In fact, it's one of the biggest reasons why professionals tend to come and see me. They don't feel like they should be there, like they're being paid too much for a job that they don't do well, that they aren't the right person for the job, and that any minute now they're going to be fired. In most cases, this is an utterly ludicrous thought. Their boss, their employers, the company they work for, their co-workers would never guess they're going through this. In fact, they might be seen as experts in their field. But it doesn't stop our brains from going, nope, this is wrong, you're a fraud. It can be really valuable to come along to somebody and actually put all that into perspective and find ways of working through it. It's a form of anxiety that can be easily managed with the right tools. This goes for a lot of forms and expressions of anxiety and depression that might not be at the level where you need medication to get through them, but they certainly are impacting on your day-to-day life. Leaving them go can often lead to a need for medication later on, simply because they've compounded into really deep issues that counselling may be effective in helping, but you probably could have headed off that entire process by seeking counselling earlier on. Trauma. Trauma has to be the biggest reason why anybody seeks counselling out there. It is literally the number one reason why I've got a client book. Trauma can impact us through our lives in so many different ways and really in obvious ways. Something that you experienced a long time ago that you thought you'd gotten through might just pop up randomly, or it's got a ramification throughout your life that you've never actually associated with trauma. This is something that didn't happen to me, but it is something from one of my mentors that told me about a case of a client that came to them with a spending habit. They were rather wealthy, so the actual act of spending wasn't really impacting on their life per se, but it was impacting on their marriage. They would often come home with like really expensive toys, like boats or new cars or go-karts for the kids or the latest computer system that the kids had been asking for. This left the wife in states of really deep anger at her partner. She felt that she was excluded, she wasn't included in these important decisions, she felt that the kids were being spoiled. She was someone that grew up in a household where everything had to be earned. The kids would have to do chores to earn their pocket money per week. And he, in the meanwhile, was just freely handing out money. And to him, he had plenty of money. It wasn't an issue. Why should the kids work hard? He worked hard enough for the family. Now, it turns out that what he was actually doing was overcompensating for his friend that died when he was a teenager. He witnessed a drowning. He couldn't recall the actual incident. He knew that it had happened. He knew that he'd been there, but he didn't recollect the incident. What this left him with was a deep traumatic scar in his life that expressed itself in being overly free and a bit silly at times with money. He had the mentality of you only live once. And sometimes that's a great thing to go on adventures and have this amazing life out there, but it can really impact the other people in our life that don't have the same values, that don't see life as something that could be cut short tomorrow. They are planners and thinkers, and they like to have an established way of doing things. Now, his relationship was fine once he had some counselling and came to realise not just his own actions and why he acted the way he did, but that his wife didn't think that way and that his children might not grow up with the best set of values because he was passing on a really mixed message. Do what you want, get what you want, spend how you can. This wasn't to his wife setting his children up for success of their own later on. Now, in his case, it was almost a really clear cut to a counsellor what the connections were here. To him, though, there was no connection at all. He didn't associate his spending with this youth trauma. He certainly didn't put down overspending as a result of something that had happened to a friend of his when he was a teenager. But there it was. To a counsellor, this was a very clear-cut case of cause and effect. And sometimes that's the point of counselling. Something that's not obvious to you might be obvious to somebody that's specifically trained in this. Interpersonal relationships. Closely related to the trauma part, one of the biggest reasons that people will come and see a counsellor is for their interpersonal relationships. This could be marriage counselling or family counselling, but it can also just be with friends and family. They might notice that they have a tendency of pushing people away, or people just stop talking to them and they can't quite figure out why. It might be that they've got some personal issues in communications that they just don't see. Sometimes it's really hard to see the habits that we have and the way that we interact with people because it's us doing it. We've got a set way of thinking and we don't appreciate how other people view things. So we might be really rude, gruff, aggressive. We come off as just nasty in our communications. And our thought process isn't these things. It's not aggressive. It's not nasty. You're not thinking anything bad about them. It's just the way you deliver it to them. Sometimes having a professional come in and say, hey, let's take a step back. We're going to work through this so that you learn when you're doing these things, so that you notice other people's reactions so that they stop pulling away from you. It can be a really valuable tool, both personally to get along with people in your life and to maintain better friendships and better interpersonal relationships, as well as that professionally. It can be a great way to get along with clients better by learning how to communicate better. If you're in a position with a high sales job, you want the best tools possible. Counselling can often give you those. Childhood issues. Again, this is closely related to trauma, but not every incident in our life is literally a trauma. Sometimes they just leave marks and shadows over things that come through our life, but you wouldn't call them traumatic. They were just the way things were or something that happened. Now, yes, it might technically be trauma, but it might also just not be quite at that level. It might be just something that happened a long time ago or the way you were brought up. So now you need somebody to step in and say, hey, look, this might be happening because of this. A might be happening because of B and C. I have many clients that come in and they don't see their childhood as traumatic. They might not see it as idyllic, but they certainly don't think of it as having any trauma involved. They just think of it as just how things were. They grew up in a rough neighbourhood, they grew up in a particular way or in a certain religion, and the shadow of these events have cast the way that they think later on in life. And sometimes it doesn't work out for the best. You might need to be able to step back and go, oh, I think that way because that was how I was brought up. Counselling is a great way to address these issues if you're feeling like there might be something going on from your childhood that you can't quite recall or you can't quite place how important it is on your life now, but you know that it's there. Or it might help you clarify this is from your childhood. Counselling is also a great way of exploring your own thinking and processes and habits. You might be in a position of professional development where this is necessary. Like I said, in sales, it can be really important to learn how to communicate. But more than that, it can be really important to learn how you think and how you interact with other people as well. It can be really important to know your place and the way you react and how you think about situations. This can come in really valuable for students that are studying something like a PhD or a master's, and they really need to let go of their own biases to be able to immerse themselves in research. I've helped a few uni students and a few people with professional development to enable them to step outside of their own ways of thinking and to step into that of what they're studying or who they're selling to or what they're doing for their career. Professional development is hugely enhanced when you've got somebody that can actually go, okay, this is how you're thinking of this, and this might be a better way of doing it. Or here's a tool that will allow you to see how other people are seeing this. Now, on top of that, you might also go and see a counsellor for self-improvement. Now, self-improvement is a bit of a weird topic because our behaviours and the way that we do things all come down to like the habits that we've learned through our lives, our reactions, the way we do things, and sometimes you might need to reassess those so that you get a more effective way of doing something. If you're somebody that has been late to everything their entire life and you just can't figure out why, it's not like you plan to be late, but it might turn out that you kind of do. I know somebody in my life that is late for everything. The moment you say, okay, it's time to go, we've got 15 minutes to be there, they will literally go and vacuum the hallway or start washing a wall or just decide at that point that that's when the chickens need to be mucked out. Is literally that point right there. It can't wait till later on. It's got to happen right now. It is so frustrating. One day I sat them down and just said, hey, you do know that you do this, right? We're late to stuff and I hate being late. I am not a late person. I am there 15 minutes earlier. I'm not going at all. And I said, you're impacting me. I don't like this. I don't like being late. Why would you pick up the vacuum cleaner right as I said it's time to go? You had all morning to do that. And they said, oh, I didn't. You did. You very much did. And you do this all the time. So I'm going to start writing it on a board every time we go out the door, what you decide to do. And in a month, I had a board that had some very odd things, literally mucking out the chicken shed or changing outfits or cleaning the bathroom or picking up the vacuum cleaner. And I said, hey, this is why we're late to stuff. It's not that like the traffic was bad. It's not that we were disorganized. You made us late. That realization made them change their habits of behavior, and now we're not late to things. Mostly. It still happens occasionally. Because I'm not their therapist. I'm literally not their therapist. I just had to point out that it was happening. But I've also worked with people in this capacity where they haven't realized that they are deliberately making themselves late. It's an anxiety response for a lot of people, and it's a subconscious one at that. So they didn't realize that they were doing it almost deliberately, subconsciously, but deliberately. Counselling can be a great way to find out that you're doing this and addressing it, as well as for other issues that you might not be consciously aware of. Being able to change your habits and behaviours is much easier if you know what your habits are, and if you're working with somebody whose literal job is to point these things out and to develop new skills with you, and to use the strengths that you already have to build new, more positively impactful behaviours in your life. Sometimes you might just want to get counselling for outsider perspective. It might be that you have been in a situation where you really aren't sure if it's you. Like, maybe you've been told that it's you and the way you do things, and you might just want a few sessions where you can go, okay, is this me? And you might discover that no, it's actually somebody else, and you're being a little bit gaslit by it. That they might not have the most accurate representation of you, or maybe it actually is you and there are some other issues that you need to explore. But having an outsider perspective can be really valuable if you need to just self-assess. Sometimes the self-assessment involves somebody else in a completely neutral stance helping us do that process. You might also need to vent and release. This can be really important, and often we don't have space for this in our lives. We often don't feel comfortable in doing this to family and friends. It may be directly involved with them. It may be that their mother is just driving you insane and you don't know how to cope with it. But every time you bring it up, it starts an argument, so you don't, which means that you sit on it, which means that it becomes an issue, and it just goes from there. Having a professional that you can get on the phone to or video or sit down with and say, oh, this is killing me. I really hate dealing with this, can be so impactful on your mental health in such a positive way. You might not walk out of it knowing how to deal with somebody else and their issues, but at least you can learn how to put things into perspective and how to deal with the situation, or just have a space to vent it. We're really good at listening, so we really don't mind if that's what you need to do. Sometimes that is the therapeutic approach, is just having a good whinge and getting it out of your system. It's better than bottling it up anyway. You might also need counselling to move on from the past. It could be that there have been some marital issues and you think you've gotten past them, but every time there's an argument, it just gets brought up over and over again. This can apply to more than just your marriage. It can apply to your childhood friendships. It can apply to your family. It can apply to just about anything, even work. We often think we've let go of stuff and we've moved past it, and then something happens that triggers us and we realise that we really haven't moved past it at all, and it becomes a very unhealthy space to live in. We don't want to deal with it, and other people don't want to deal with us in it. We said we moved on, and yet here we are, same issue over again. It can be so frustrating and so hard to deal with, but we just can't help it. We don't know how to actually move on from these things. It might have been a big thing, it might have been a little thing, but we just don't know how to let go of it. Counselling can be a great way to learn tools to actually put the past in the past and to leave things alone. To learn that each interaction is a new interaction and it's not the same interaction again. Or where to draw a line in yourself so that you go, that is actually my line. I thought that I could move past it, but I can't. Sometimes that's perfectly acceptable, and sometimes you need help seeing that. You might come and see a counsellor for sleep or mood disorders. We're really good at setting you up with new habits and new tools for things like building new routines. I myself specialise in being able to get people into new sleep modes because I've had sleep issues most of my life, and it was new therapies that helped me get through that. Nowadays, I don't really have many issues. Occasionally, I will have a fit of insomnia, but I certainly deal with it in a much healthier way than I used to in the past. Now, I don't go for days or weeks feeling like garbage. I know how to deal with a fit of it. I know how to keep it minimal. and therapy was one of the things that helped me do that. Same as when it comes to moods. Sometimes mood stabilizers help, but if it's literally a habit that's gotten you into a negative mood, it can be a habit that gets you out of it and that you learn to control it. Why go for a medical intervention of pharmaceuticals and drugs when all it might take is a new way of looking at something or a new way of doing something? Much easier in the long run and much better for you. Instead of just putting a band-aid on the problem, you're actually addressing the problem. This can be really valuable. To keep your headspace clean. You might have been to therapy for years for an issue in the past and then find yourself 6 years later sort of going, oh, okay, maybe, is it coming back? Is it the same thing over again? And all it is that you just need a little bit of maintenance on your headspace. Maybe you've forgotten some of the stuff that was told to you that really helped you in the beginning and you just didn't put it in as habit over the years, so you just need a bit of a refresher course on it. This can be really valuable to just occasionally see a therapist, maybe once every 6 months, just to say, hey, I'm on track, or hey, I'm not really on track this month, I'm feeling a bit out there. What was that thing that you said? Or I really just need a fresh perspective on this to make sure that it's not me. These can be really valuable things that come back to it's always good to have a professional's input if we want to make changes or maintain the changes that we've made. You might also, on that note, want to actually develop some self-care plans or some personal plans for achieving goals. Now, it doesn't seem obvious at first, but counselling can help you achieve some of the massive life goals by breaking them down into doable steps. That's kind of one of the things that we do in therapies. In fact, it's kind of the point of the entire therapy. We set a goal and then we break it down into manageable ways you can achieve these goals. It might be a really big goal, it might be a little goal. It could be changing your entire life, or it could be changing one thing and working towards it. It could be that promotion at work, it could be getting along with your mother-in-law, or it could just be, I don't want to wake up hating my job. Whatever that goal is, we can help you set plans into place and put in self-care plans to work in a healthy life balance. It's really easy to forget, particularly through when we watch a lot of media that's fed to us, that happiness is a strategy. It doesn't happen to us. We have to have a plan in place and we have to recognize things that make us happy to be happy. It's not as obvious as it looks. Now, you might also want to seek counselling for other medical reasons or psychosocial reasons, such as drug and alcohol counselling, marriage counselling, relationship counselling, and all the general stuff there that, of course, it's known that that's why you go and get some counselling. AOD, or alcohol and other drug counselling, can be an invaluable tool on the recovery process. Some people absolutely require that side of it to really go into recovery mode and to maintain that recovery. But what I was more talking about today is just the other reasons why you might want to seek out counselling as opposed to why you definitely need counselling. Counselling is something that should be acknowledged as a really valuable tool. I'm not just saying that because I'm a counsellor trying to drum up business. I've got business. I'm saying that because it should be normalised as a resource that we access, as much as going to the doctor, as much as going to a psychiatrist, as much as going to the dentist. Counselling is a valuable tool for a lot of people and it is sorely underutilised. Sometimes it's the price that puts people off because it can be a very large commitment. But there are actually some free counselling services out there for specific needs, like if you're in Australia, there's Relationships Australia, or your state or territory is likely to have AOD or alcohol and other drug recovery counselling that is very low cost or free. There are quite often government programs that also run these types of things. Relationships Australia is a great starting point if you have relationship issues and you really need somebody to talk to. But if you have the resources to set yourself up and to choose your counsellor, I highly recommend that you do that. A free service is a free service. They have limited resources, they will have specific needs, and they are only going to be able to help you for a set time. Setting yourself up is a much more valuable way of going about it because A, that commitment that you are making financially and with your time, they really do make a huge difference in the end. You are spending on your self-development. You will be much more inclined to develop. So I hope that's been helpful. I hope it wasn't too deep. I hope it was handy. So this is Lucy from A Good Chat, and I hope this was a good chat, and I will see you next time. Bye.